Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. Now before I get into the topic of this video, if you guys could do me a favour, check out the link in the pinned comments. My good friend Mark at Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News has done an interview with Olympic bronze medalist Fraser Clarke for heavyweight. He's turning pro very shortly, and Mark did a very good interview with him, so if you would check that out, much appreciated. But let's get into the topic of today's video, and that topic is Conor Benn. His next fight has been scheduled and announced. He's fighting on the 11th of December, and he will be taking on Chris Algieri. Now, on social media, for the most part, this fight has been met with disappointment, and quite frankly, I think most people are underwhelmed by this opponent, and I would tend to agree, quite frankly. Now, Chris Algieri, he is an experienced trial horse, actually a former world champion, back at 140 back in 2014, but in recent years, Chris Algieri has been relatively inactive. He's almost been semi-retired. He's been working as a commentator for DAZN. He also worked as a nutritionist for Daniel Jacobs, but he's not been fighting all that regularly, and also he is 37 years old. His last few fights have been at 140 pounds, and like I say, he's had like one fight in 2 years. So Chris Algieri is a guy who is basically on the tail end of his career. He's seen better days, and for me this opponent is just underwhelming. Conor Benn has had these sort of fights against faded veterans like Samuel Vargas, obviously Adrian Granados. He's had a couple of those sort of guys already, and at the time I had no real problem with those fights. But I think as it stands right now, I think it's time for Conor Benn to fight somebody with a bit of ambition, not somebody who is over the hill and basically there for a payday and there to survive, because that's what Chris Algieri, in my opinion, will do in this fight. He'll try and extend Conor Benn some rounds and basically see out the distance, and he'll see that as a moral victory. But Conor Benn's had a couple of those sort of guys already, like I say, Adrian Granados, Samuel Vargas, even Sebastian Formella to a lesser extent. So again, for me personally, Eddie Hearn's talking about Conor Benn like he's 1 or 2 fights away from a world title. He has said that. Well, if that's the case, I expect a better level opponent than Chris Algieri. If the hype wasn't so crazy with Conor Benn and they weren't selling him the way they are, I wouldn't really have a big problem with Chris Algieri being the opponent. I think it's good matchmaking, it's a good learning fight, but when you're selling Conor Benn as being 1 or 2 fights away from a world title, I think it's reasonable to expect better. I mean, all I'm really asking for is Conor Benn to fight somebody with actual ambition, who's there to win. You know, Chris Algieri, for the most part, has quite a negative style, likes to box behind the jab and maintain range and use his legs. For the most part, he changed his style against Amir Khan back in the day, but for the most part he's an outboxer who likes to move. But he's faded. Why not fight somebody like that who's fresh? For example, Michael McKinson. He's unbeaten, he's a domestic rival, and I think people would be a lot more excited for that fight. I know Michael McKinson doesn't have a great style to watch, but neither does Chris Algieri, and Michael McKinson would be a lot more interesting for us British boxing fans. So yeah, for me, Chris Algieri as an opponent is underwhelming, especially considering the amount of hype Conor Benn is getting right now. And also I find it disappointing that once again Conor Benn is in there with a complete non-puncher, and once again this fight is scheduled for 10 rounds. Conor Benn so far has only had 1 fight scheduled for 12, and that was Samuel Vargas, but every other fight has been listed as a 10-rounder. So I'm not sure what the deal with that is, but it certainly feels like, or it seems like, they're keeping Conor Benn away from punches. Maybe they don't have confidence in his chin, his defense. Bear in mind, this guy got dropped twice and badly hurt by Cedric Paynaud. Let's not forget O'Hara Davis broke Conor Benn's jaw in the gym, so maybe his handlers don't really have faith in his durability, and maybe they're moving him into a position where they can basically cash out in a really big pay-per-view fight. That's what it seems like right now. It seems like they're wrapping Conor Benn up in cotton wool, and it seems like they're not willing to let him take a fight that is remotely interesting or potentially challenging. You know, I mean, look at the David Avanesian case, for example. Apparently, according to Neil Marsh, Avanesian's manager, Conor Benn was offered £500,000 to fight David Avanesian. That's a lot of money for a European title fight, but it's clear that Conor Benn and his team want nothing to do with David Avanesian. And what makes that worse, in my opinion, was that Conor Benn, Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn's team tried to get Avanesian to vacate that title so that Conor Benn could fight for it. I think the matchmaking for Conor Benn, or the selective nature of the matchmaking for Conor Benn, is getting boring at this stage. And honestly, I wouldn't mind so much if there wasn't so much hype with Conor Benn, if he wasn't being sold as a precocious talent who is 1 or 2 fights away from a world title. You know, if he wasn't being sold like that, I wouldn't really mind this fight all that much from a development point of view. But again, Conor Benn is being sold a certain way, so I think it's fair to expect him to take tougher challenges. And I'm not being unrealistic. I'm not saying Conor Benn needs to fight flipping Sean Porter or anything like that. I'm just asking for a guy with ambition, a guy who's coming to win, even at domestic level, like Michael McKinson, Lewis Crocker. I wouldn't even care if it was Florian Marku. Like, all of these sort of opponents, I'd be okay with, to be honest. I'd be okay with it, but yeah, I'm kind of sick of these faded guys coming over, and Conor Benn just has no resistance whatsoever. I'm sick of these sort of fights as it stands. So yeah, share your thoughts below. What do you make of Chris Algieri? Do you think I'm being harsh on Chris Algieri as an opponent for Conor Benn, or do you see this the same way as I do? Share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Del Boy. Peace.